There is a silent pain that many parents carry, but can rarely explain. The pain of realizing that their children, those little beings who once needed so much care, guidance, and affection, have grown up. And as they've grown up, they haven't just changed in size. They've changed the way they look at us. They changed the way they listen to us. They changed the place we occupied in their lives. Perhaps you know this feeling well. You've spent decades giving of yourself. You put your children first, before your own health, your peace, your will. You've given up dreams, held back tears, given up space. And now when all you want is a quiet conversation, a gesture of affection, or simply to be seen with respect, you receive silence, distance, or even contempt. You try to say something, and you're cut off. You try to teach, and you're corrected. Sometimes you even feel like you're being treated like a burden, and the question comes like an uncomfortable whisper, did I do all this for nothing? It's easy, at that moment, to want to shout for recognition, to remember everything you've done, to try by force to regain the place you once occupied. But as Carl Jung said, that which resists persists. Insisting on changing others only imprisons us. True transformation, according to Jung, begins when we look inwards, when we stop asking for love and start loving ourselves, when we stop looking for approval and start living according to our truth. There's something that perhaps no one has told you yet. You can still completely change the way your children see you. But it doesn't happen by trying to be more helpful, more present, or nicer. It happens when you regain the silent authority of someone you know, who you respect. Those who finally accept that old age is not the end. It's the climax of individuation, as Jung would say. This video is not a lament, it's a call for you to reconnect with everything that has been forgotten inside, with the power, with the presence, with the wisdom that only the years can bring. These teachings are not ready-made advice. They are profound truths, revealed by those who have understood that the soul continues to grow, even when the body has slowed down. And if you decide to listen with an open heart, you may discover that respect, love, and connection were not lost, just dormant. This video is not against anyone, it's for you, you who kept quiet for so long, you who gave of yourself until you were empty. But before we start, consider subscribing to the channel to receive more content like this. Carl Jung used to say that human life is divided into two great cycles, morning and evening. In the first half of life, we seek achievements, identity, and recognition. We are driven by goals, by obligations, by everything that helps us become someone in the world. This is when we start a family, work, take care of ourselves, and give of ourselves. But Jung warned us, the values that sustain youth are not the same as those that sustain old age. From a certain point on, what once gave us purpose begins to lose its luster. Not because it has lost its value, but because life now asks us for a different kind of response. The second half of life is the time of interiority, a quieter, more intimate, truer time. This is when we are invited to stop living for what the world expects and start living for what the soul needs. The problem is that we don't always accompany this transition with awareness. Many parents, for example, still try to maintain the same relationship with their adult children as before. They still give advice as if their children were children. They still expect obedience, gratitude, or even constant companionship, as if time had not passed. But it has, and we need to recognize it. Not with sadness, but with wisdom. Jung said that resisting the demands of a new phase of life is like wanting to light a candle at midday. The light has already changed, the landscape is different, and what worked before can now cause suffering. Many parents suffer not because their children reject them, but because they themselves are still stuck in a role that has already been fulfilled. It's not a question of abandoning the children, nor of withdrawing emotionally. It's about accepting that the relationship needs to change shape. Dependence needs to give way to mutual respect, authority needs to give way to listening, and control needs to be replaced by trust. Healthy aging doesn't just happen in the body, it starts in the mind. A change of attitude is needed, a deep acceptance that life goes on, with or without our approval. And when we choose to go with the flow, without resisting, we find something we may never have felt so clearly: peace. The second half of life is not a repetition of the first. It's a new path, a rare chance to look at yourself without haste, without guilt, without the pressure to prove anything to anyone. It's during this time that we can finally truly find ourselves. But to do so, we need to let go of the old structures, the old roles, the old expectations. You've already done a lot. You've cared, you've taught, you've given all you can. Now, it's time to take care of yourself, to look inwards, to discover who you are beyond the role of parent. Jung didn't see old age as decadence. He saw it as fullness, a time of harvest, not loss. But in order to harvest, you have to stop planting in the same old soil. The soul asks for new values. It asks for silence, depth, and truth. And if you have the courage to listen to this call, you may discover that the best of life may be starting now. Throughout their lives, many parents believe that loving is synonymous with giving in, giving up time, giving up space, giving up wills. They do it out of love, yes, but they often keep doing it even when it's no longer necessary, even when they're exhausted. And little by little, without realizing it, they erase themselves in the name of bonds that should be built with balance. Carl Jung warned us about the danger of one-sidedness. When a part of us is ignored, it doesn't disappear, it turns into a shadow. The shadow of someone who has always given in is resentment. It's the feeling of invisibility. It's the silent pain of no longer feeling recognized. In an attempt to keep their children close, many parents end up assuming a posture of total availability. They are always there, waiting, ready to help, ready to listen, ready to serve. But this boundless presence can lead to the opposite effect. Instead of closeness, it creates distance, not out of malice, but because human beings tend to value what has contours, what occupies a place, what imposes an existence. When a father or mother bends down too much, they lose their shape in front of their children's eyes. This doesn't mean that it's wrong to be generous, nor that we should live closed in on ourselves, but it does mean that affection needs to be accompanied by limits. Love doesn't demand disappearance. On the contrary, it demands real presence. And presence is only possible when there is respect for oneself. When you never say no, when you remain silent whenever you are hurt, when you accept everything in the name of harmony, you may be teaching others that your feelings don't matter, that your presence is guaranteed, that you'll be there no matter what, even if you're ignored, even if you're treated with indifference. But respect doesn't come from insistence. Respect comes from the encounter between two whole presences. And for that to happen, you have to reclaim your space, your time, your voice, not with aggression but with silent firmness, with the dignity of someone who knows their own worth. Jung said that what we stop being will one day take its toll. When we spend years writing ourselves off, there comes a time when our body or mind calls us back. And that call can come in the form of sadness, anguish, emptiness. It's not weakness, it's a sign that something inside you wants to be remembered. You don't need to demand recognition, but you do need to remember who you are. When you treat yourself with respect, with care, with attention, others notice. And little by little, something changes. The relationship is reorganized. The place that used to be occupied by demand starts to be occupied by presence. It's not about punishing the children with silence or withdrawing as a form of punishment. It's about coming back to yourself, filling your life with meaning, recovering your form. When you find yourself again, others begin to see you again. Annulment is no virtue, unlimited surrender is not nobility. And the love you so desire is not born from the absence of self, but from the truth of who you are. Teaching your children to see you begins when you allow yourself to be seen by you first. There comes a time in life when everything slows down. Children grow up. Commitments diminish. What was once urgency becomes silence. And in that silence, many find themselves for the first time facing an unexpected feeling: emptiness. It's not just loneliness. It's something deeper. It's the feeling that something has ended, but you're not sure what will begin next. Carl Jung saw this moment in a different light than usual. For him, this emptiness was not a sign of failure or a lack of value. It was a call from the soul, an invitation to the second great task of existence, discovering who you are, when you're no longer busy being what others expect. For decades, life has been organized around roles: father, mother, professional, caregiver, provider. These are important and often necessary roles, but none of them are permanent. And when these roles no longer make sense, what's left is the encounter with one's innermost self, a self that has often been pushed aside in the name of duty. This encounter can be frightening. It's uncomfortable to look inside and realize how much of yourself has been forgotten, but it can also be liberating, because it is at this moment that the opportunity opens up to live no longer out of obligation, but by choice. Jung called this process individuation, the path back to one's own essence. It's when we stop identifying only with external roles and begin to recognize who we are on the inside, not as a function, but as a presence, not as an image, but as truth. Emptiness, in this sense, is not absence. It is space, a new space, not yet occupied, that demands care and attention. And what we do with this space defines the rest of our lives. Some people try to fill it with activities, distractions, and artificial commitments, but this only postpones the inevitable. Others immerse themselves in memories, trying to relive what has already passed. This also leads to suffering. The invitation of emptiness is different. It's to create meaning, create new bonds, to create a life that no longer depends on being useful to others, but on being true to oneself. This is where many parents get lost. Accustomed to caring, guiding, and giving, they feel they no longer have a role. And they confuse this loss of role with a loss of value. But there's a huge difference between no longer being needed and no longer being important. Children may no longer need advice, practical help, or constant support, but they can still be inspired by the example of those who knew how to grow old with dignity, of those who knew how to turn silence into wisdom. There is beauty in the time that opens up after children. It's a calmer, deeper time, and also more sincere, because now it's no longer about doing, but about being present without demanding anything, accepting without being extinguished, listening without expecting applause. This phase of life is a rare opportunity to live fully, without haste, without trials, without fear of disappointment. It's when you can look back with gratitude and, at the same time, look forward with serenity. Because even if the time is shorter, the meaning can be greater. A mature soul doesn't want noise, it wants truth, and truth can only be found in the silence that emptiness offers. A silence that is frightening at first, but gradually reveals the beauty of a life that has finally come back to itself. If you feel like you've lost something, that something has broken, know this. Perhaps it's not a loss, but a passage. It's not the end of everything. It's the end of an old way of living, and the beginning of a new presence. A presence that is lighter, more honest, more yours. Jung said that the soul speaks softly, and that in the second half of life we can finally hear it. This is the call of emptiness, not to give up, but to start again, without haste, without masks, without needing to please, just to live. And live now, with meaning. Throughout our lives, we often look to others for what we believe we lack. When we're young, we project the protection we need onto our parents. Then, in partners, security. Later, in our children, continuity. At each stage, we place our expectations in someone, and we often believe that this is how love should work. One needs the other to be whole. But according to Carl Jung, this belief is the root of much suffering. Jung saw life as a process of integration. For him, true maturity comes when we stop projecting what is lacking in us onto others, when we stop waiting for someone else to complete us. This doesn't mean rejecting bonds or living in isolation. It means understanding that no one, absolutely, no one can be responsible for sustaining our sense of existence. As we get older, this truth becomes even clearer. When their children grow up and go their separate ways, many parents feel an emptiness, not just because of their physical absence, but because part of their identity was anchored in their presence. Without them around, it feels like something has been lost. Routines change, roles change, and with that come feelings of uselessness, abandonment, and loneliness. But these feelings, as painful as they may be, are also a sign of an invitation. An invitation to take an honest look at what we still expect from others, especially our children. We expect frequent connections. We expect recognition. We expect them to come and visit us, to ask how we are, to include us. We often expect them to fill the time we now have left. However, Jung invites us to ask a deeper question. What if your peace doesn't depend on any of this? What if your completeness didn't have to come from outside? Emotional dependence, however subtle, limits children's freedom and sickens parents' souls. This doesn't mean that the bond has to end. On the contrary, true bonds become stronger when they stop being a requirement and become a choice. When love is not conditional on constant presence or an immediate response, but flows naturally. To be complete is not to be self-sufficient in the cold sense of the word. It's being whole enough not to need to prove anything, not to charge, not to live in constant expectation. It's being able to say to yourself, I'm enough, even when I'm alone. That's freedom, that's emotional maturity. Of course, we all crave company. It's natural to want to be close to those you love. But there's an essential difference between wanting and needing. When we want, we offer. When we need, we demand. And what is demanded loses its lightness, its grace. The other person's presence becomes a duty, not a gift. To aging parents, Jung would suggest, stop looking outside for what can only be found inside. Look at the parts of yourself that have been forgotten, the abandoned interests, the silenced desires, the guarded talents. Rediscover what was good for you before you had children, or discover what you can do well now without depending on anyone. There is a profound beauty in those who grow old with emotional autonomy, in those who are at peace with themselves. These people don't demand, they inspire. They don't impose, they welcome. And that is precisely why they are remembered with love, visited with desire, listened to with attention, because they don't demand space, they occupy their own. Jung believed that the soul's greatest task was to reconcile with itself, and that this only happened when we stopped looking to the world for what the world could never offer. Neither children, nor friends, nor companions can fill what only self-awareness is capable of sustaining. So if you feel that others have drifted away, ask yourself, what am I still expecting from them? And then gently try to let go of that expectation, not by giving up, but out of love. Because when we stop demanding, we make room for the real encounter. The other never completes us, but they can walk alongside us. And that, in the end, is all we need. Throughout life, we are taught to show only our best parts. We learn to be strong, patient, helpful, to smile even when we're tired, to stay calm even when we feel angry, to look good, even when inside everything is in ruins. But Carl Jung taught us that what we try to hide doesn't disappear. It stays there, in the shadows, waiting for a moment to reveal itself. For Jung, the shadow represents all the aspects of ourselves that we deny, repress, or ignore. Our fears, resentments, insecurities, anger, sadness, jealousy, shame. Not because they're necessarily bad, but because we haven't learned to accept them as part of who we are. And the more we try to keep these emotions out of sight, the more they manifest themselves in ways we can't control. In maturity, this intensifies. After so many years of being the pillar of the family, the example, the role model, many parents find it difficult to acknowledge that they also feel angry with their children, that they are sometimes disappointed, that they feel wronged, that they carry grievances. But denying these feelings is the quickest route to silent suffering. Jung said that what you resist persists. In other words, everything you try to hide in yourself comes back with greater force. That's why growing old wisely necessarily involves a process of integration, accepting that light and shadow, strength and fragility, generosity and frustration coexist within us, and that all of this is human. It's not easy to admit that we have feelings that we think are inadequate, but it is necessary, because it's only by naming the pain that we can release it. Only by saying, yes, I'm hurt, can we treat ourselves with compassion. Only by recognizing that we feel envy or anger or resentment do these emotions stop controlling us. Many parents live with a lump in their throat, trying to keep their composure. But there is a limit, and when the accumulated anger explodes, it often comes in a destructive form, with shouting, accusations, definitive withdrawals. Not because the person is bad, but because they have ignored for too long what needed to be accepted. The shadow doesn't need to be fought. It needs to be listened to. It carries parts of us that have been rejected, and which, when recognized, make us more whole. The person who is able to say, "I felt despised by my son, and that hurt," is much closer to healing than the one who just says it's okay while they are eating away inside. Accepting the shadow doesn't mean justifying attitudes or remaining in pain. It means looking honestly at yourself, recognizing that we are complex, and that there is no virtue in pretending to be perfect. Quite the opposite. There is freedom in being real. And this is especially true in family relationships. When a parent has the courage to say, "I make mistakes too," or "I feel bad about this," it opens up space for a more authentic relationship. Children also carry shadows, and when parents show vulnerability with dignity, they allow their children to do the same. Jung believed that healing came from wholeness, not perfection. The soul doesn't want absolute purity. It wants coherence, and coherence means living in peace with all parts of ourselves, including those we are still learning to love. In old age, the shadow takes on new forms. It can come as recurring sadness, as a feeling of uselessness, as contained anger. It can manifest itself as a constant comparison with others, as bitter criticism, or as silence full of weight. None of this needs to be denied. It can all be understood, and understanding is not the same as identifying. It's not about becoming a hostage to pain. It's about giving it a safe place to exist, because when you listen to your own shadow, it no longer needs to scream. Accepting the most difficult emotions is one of the greatest acts of courage in mature life. And it's also one of the deepest paths to inner peace. When we are no longer afraid of what we feel, we become free. And this freedom is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and also to those around us. Many people think that the meaning of life lies in the great achievements, the visible conquests, the defining moments. But Carl Jung taught us something different. For him, the soul finds rest not in grandiose achievements, but in inner harmony. And this harmony comes from contact with what is simple, everyday, and essential. As we get older, life's great movements diminish. Travel becomes rarer. The body requires more breaks. External demands are reduced. And it's at this point that many people ask themselves, what still gives me pleasure? This question, although it may seem small, has immense depth. It forces us to reconnect with the instant, and that's where the meaning lies. Jung understood that the unconscious communicates with us all the time, but not through great revelations. It manifests itself in symbols, simple gestures, dreams, and apparently banal encounters. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers, and to hear it, you have to slow down. For this reason, one of the greatest emotional health exercises in maturity is to create small rituals of pleasure and meaning. It could be having a coffee in a quiet place, going for a walk and watching the sky, listening to music that triggers a good memory, looking after a plant, writing a page in a notebook. It doesn't matter how big the action is, but how mindfully it is done. These small gestures reconnect us with life. They bring back a sense of presence. They remind the body and mind that we are alive, not just existing, but feeling. And this is something that no technology, no child, no external event can offer in our place. Many parents reach old age, expecting their children to fill the gaps in their routine. They want more calls, more visits, more attention. But when this expectation isn't met, frustration grows, and the feeling of abandonment sets in. Jung warned us about the danger of projection. When we place the responsibility for our well-being on others, we become prisoners of their absence. The way out lies precisely in turning inwards and to what is around us. What is within your reach? What can you do today with the hands you have, with the time you have, with the body you have? Maybe you can't run like you used to, but you can still walk slowly, feeling the ground. Maybe your eyes don't see as clearly, but you can still contemplate the late afternoon light. Maybe the house is quieter, but that silence can be the frame for a peace you never had time to cultivate. Many people believe that finding joy again requires big changes. Jung shows us that in fact the deepest transformation begins with what is closest. The simple done with awareness becomes sacred, and it is in the sacred that the soul rests. This is not to romanticize loneliness or deny the real pains of aging. It's simply recognizing that there is power in the ordinary, that life continues to happen even in the smallest details, and that there is dignity in choosing how to live each day, even if it's not the same as before. By paying attention to the little things, we stop waiting for something big to save us. We stop counting the days we have left and start appreciating the ones we do have. This is an internal movement, silent but powerful. It doesn't require youth, perfect health, or recognition. It only requires presence. And when you learn to be present in what you live, time ceases to be an enemy. It becomes an ally. Every morning is a fresh start. Every simple gesture, a choice. Every breath, an opportunity to give thanks for still being here. Jung said that what gives life meaning also saves it from despair. And sometimes, that meaning is just in calmly making a cup of tea, organizing a corner of the house, sitting unhurriedly in the sun, listening to yourself. The soul doesn't ask for big answers, it asks for presence, and maturity offers us the rarest gift, time. Time to see the value of what was once invisible. Time to live fully even in the little things. There is a profound difference between being loved and being respected. Love can be born out of gratitude, coexistence, and memory. Respect, on the other hand, is born of presence, from someone who is whole, even in silence, from someone who doesn't demand admiration, but inspires naturally, from those who occupy their own space without having to compete. Carl Jung understood respect as the result of a life aligned with itself. Over the years, many fathers and mothers find themselves in a delicate place. They love their children deeply, but feel that they are no longer heard, that their words no longer carry weight, that their presence has lost strength. It's common at this point to try to regain authority by remembering the past, demanding recognition, demanding consideration. But paradoxically, the more you demand respect, the less it comes. Jung said that what we want to impose by force usually escapes us. True respect does not come from shouting, demanding, or remembering everything that has been done. It comes from coherence, harmony between what you feel and what you live. And that starts inside, not outside. The problem is that, over time, many people lose sight of who they are. They spend so much time being someone's parents and someone's spouse and someone's employee that they forget their own identity. And when these roles dissolve, when the children leave home, when the job ends, when the partner falls ill or leaves, an uncomfortable question remains: who am I now? Jung invites us to accept this question as necessary, not as a sign of weakness, but as a starting point, because true respect begins when you see yourself again, when you reclaim your choices, when you decide that life can still be lived with integrity even if others aren't looking. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or adopting a cold or distant stance. It means rediscovering your center, and when that center is firm, you don't need to assert yourself all the time. You simply are. And those around you feel it. Your children feel it, people feel it, and respect comes almost naturally. It's not about conquering others, it's about inhabiting yourself completely. When you become whole, you impose a presence. Not through strength, but through solidity. Not through fear, but through clarity. It is possible to say no with gentleness. It is possible to set limits with serenity. It is possible to withdraw from hurtful situations without creating conflict, just by showing that your inner peace is not for sale. Many parents believe that they always need to be available to prove their love, but there's a difference between loving and putting yourself last, between helping and canceling yourself out, between being present and accepting everything. Children don't respect those who accept anything. They respect those who, even with affection, know how to take a stand. Jung didn't talk about perfection. He was talking about wholeness. To be whole is to recognize your light and your shadow, your strength and your fragility, your history and your limits. And when this happens, a silent authority emerges, a force that doesn't need to prove anything, it just exists. It is this presence that transforms relationships. When a parent rediscovers their wholeness, The dynamic with their children changes. Conversations become deeper. Socializing becomes freer, because children are also freed from the obligation to fill a void that doesn't belong to them. You don't have to shout to be heard, nor do you have to impose yourself to be remembered. But you do have to be at peace with who you are. And that only happens when you stop trying to please or justify yourself. When you start living for yourself, with responsibility, with affection, with integrity. Respect is not asked for, it's cultivated. And that's the first step, remembering yourself. Come home. Not your brick house, but your inner house, the one, where your values, your limits, your dignity live. And once inside, the world around you begins to change. Respect begins in the mirror, and those who learn to see themselves clearly teach others to look with different eyes. Now that you've walked through these Jung-inspired teachings, you may have realized something that was previously dormant. Perhaps you've remembered how many times you've waited for a gesture, a word, a recognition that never came. How many times you gave of yourself without measure, believing that loving was enough to be respected. But little by little, you understood that love alone doesn't guarantee consideration. It also takes presence. It also takes posture. Jung said, life really begins at 40. Before that, it's just research. And if you're 60, 70 or over today, know this, the research is over. Now comes the time to live truthfully, with the serenity of those who no longer need to explain themselves, with the peace of those who no longer bend over backwards to please, not their children, or society, or the past. You can stop insisting. You can, with silent firmness, say to yourself, I choose myself now. You can set limits. You can choose silence, not as submission but as maturity. You can live more lightly, more calmly, with more dignity, and when that happens, something reorganizes. Relationships adjust. The gaze of others changes. Because respect is not imposed. It is born when you rebuild yourself from the inside. Jung reminds us, those who look outward dream. Those who look within awaken. May these words stay with you. And when you finish this video, may you take a deep breath and say, now I'm me again. If this reflection made sense to you, enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to receive more stories and reflections. Like this one. That way you won't miss out on any new content. Take care and see you next time.